Greetings, everybody out there. We're back. Gullah House Show. I'm here with Baba Kimo, my big cousin, my homie, my OG, my everything. What's going on over there in Orangeburg today, brother?
Oh man, everything is good. Everything is good. You know, today is Father's Day. First of all, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, everywhere, Sierra Leone, here in Orangeburg, Atlanta, everywhere. Um, we got a little parade going on later on this afternoon. I'm gonna go out there and watch and celebrate Juneteenth with the community. And
Yeah.
in that, man, we are ready. We got the good brother Habib, with us. He's gonna tell us about his Maroon heritage, his Jamaican culture, and let's bring him on out, brother Habib.
Absolutely. We'll bring them out. Just before we bring them out, I want to tell you that y'all better get ready for this show. All right? This brother is packed full of information, historical knowledge, and a rich cultural heritage from his family that he's now bringing out so other people can understand the true Maroon Rastafarian heritage and culture of the people, not only in Jamaica, but even Jamaica's diaspora. With no further ado, here's our brother Abib. Greetings, brother.
Greetings, greetings. Give thanks, man. I appreciate the intro for sure.
Yeah. It's an honor to have you here, man, for sure. You know, our whole goal is to bring this information to our people. We know that if we record it today, you know, 50 years from now, it's still going to be available. So it's very, very important for us to pass this information over and create these platforms. Baba Kimo, you have to lead with the questions because you be slamming them.
Well, man, Habib, man, I know you Jamaican and everything, so that's what I want to bring it out because I knew a lot of Rastafarians when I was coming up, and they always used to tell me, "Yo, Cool Rock, Jamaica is nice, Jamaica nice, man." But I didn't know that until I got there. So, brother, give us some background, and tell us about brother Habib.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I just want to say how much of an honor it is to be on this platform and speak to both of you brothers. I've been watching your work for a long time, and it's nothing but mutual respect. But a little bit about me. My both of my parents are from Jamaica. My mom is from St. Mary, which I guess you could consider more the country. My father is from Kingston, and my father he came to first he went to Bahamas, but then he came to the U.S. In the late '70s when there was a lot of political violence going on in Kingston. And my mom, she came a little bit after, and she was going to college in Connecticut, and that's actually where they met. So both of them were members of 12 Tribes, and you know they had a chapter in Connecticut as well as in Brooklyn. And so when my mom and my father met, you know, they fell in love and they moved to Brooklyn, and you know, a couple years later I was born. So yeah.
Wow. So what is 12 tribes? Let's go into that.
So
What's the 12 tribes?
So 12 Tribes is one of the organizations under the Rastafari umbrella. So you have Nyabingi, you have Bobo Shanti, and then you have 12 Tribes. 12 Tribes is more recent, I would say. It really kind of developed in the 60s under the leadership of affectionately called Gadman. But you know, it was more kind of appealing to the upper class, if you will, to the middle class, especially in Kingston. You know, back then it was a lot of division, of course, when you had the former colonial government of Jamaica at odds with Nyabingi and Bobo Shanti because they was trying to separate and create their own thing. And so 12 Tribes, it started appealing to the middle class, the more upper elite in Kingston. And that, you know, that caused the problem because now you have people's children who are now screaming about Selassie. So, you know, that became a real powerful political movement in Kingston. So my father, he became a part of that. It's the same organization. Yeah, so it definitely a powerful movement at that time. For me, you know, without all the history, it was really just like family. For me, it was most of these people's my aunties and uncles and that kind of a thing. So it was really more of a family vibe for me. I have, you know, vivid memories of going to what we call HQ in New York and just being a kid and running around and having fun. So yeah.
See, man, I remember because I was a teenager in the 70s when Rastas first started coming to New York. And I know when, man, it was a time. Reggae was everywhere. The culture was everywhere. I remember, man. I know exactly what you're talking about. I was there. I remember when Bob Marley, they didn't call him Bob then, they was calling him Nestor. When he first came to New York, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, man, I know about the 70s. I grew up during that time.
Yeah, man. They actually have 12 tribes out here in Sierra Leone as well. You know, there's a lot of Rasta influence here in Africa. Usually that's spread through the culture, through the message and the music. Most of the places you go to here, all they play is old conscious reggae. Even young bucks, they can sing it like it just came out yesterday. And you know, it's just that international connectocracy that's there, and the influence of the culture. So I guess I want to go next into your mother. I seen you honor your mother when she transitioned, you know, not too far ago, you know, not too long ago. My condolences to you and the family.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to let you tell me a little bit about how your mother influenced you, and then for Father's Day, how your father influenced you. Like, what parts of your personality come from each?
Oh man, that's a great question. Honestly, one I wasn't expecting. But my mom is a force. Emphasis on is. She so she, you know, her family has a political background, not just in Jamaican politics as it is now, but also the fact that, you know, she comes from, that's the side that's the Windward Maroons, the Queen Anne's Maroons. That's that side. So her family has always kind of been community leaders and that kind of a thing. So she's very outgoing. She's very like she's never met a stranger in her life. Very industrious, super smart, super sharp, and can work a room. And so I think I gained a lot of my confidence from my mom for sure. She was definitely that. But you know, she was somebody that was enigmatic, man. So you know, when her and my father were managing reggae artists in Brooklyn, you know, she was assisting casting directors with casting different videos. So you know, she was really into community when it comes to the entertainment industry. She was just really, you know, she was really good at networking. Um, my mom is just, yeah, I don't know. There's so many ways I can go with that, but my father, my father's, I would say definitely the embodiment of a Nazi. Growing up with my father I can, you know, I can think of because he was somebody that he wasn't dogmatic, right? He would challenge you to think. So, you know, I have vivid memories of me and my siblings being in the room with my father and him just, you know, smoking a spliff and just would ask a question to kind of open up the discussion. And we would just go at each other and just debate and going back and forth. And he would just sit back and smile and ask another question and just, you know, just kind of keep that kind of spirit going. So my father, the ways that he's influenced me is to think outside of the box, to not always take the easy answer, to challenge yourself, challenge your thought, um, and really take time to look at nuance and context. Um, my father is definitely a thinker, but more to himself than my mom was. But both of them have influenced me in tremendous ways.
That's powerful, man. That's powerful. So, what was it like being the first generation, being born over in America, living there? Did your family travel back to Jamaica often? Did you have an opportunity to connect with your relatives back home?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And you know what? Again, I think my experience was a little different than most first generation Jamaicans. Um, you know, we didn't really live a slow life, so to speak. I didn't grow up, you know, in a house or an apartment, and you know, my parents was cooking cookies or something. You know, it was very fast. Like when I was born, I can't my older brother sister I can explain differently, but when I was born in 1988, we was really in the thick of it. My mother and my father they had a very successful roots business, Jamaican roots business. Um, and you know, roots was kind of looked at as obia. I guess here they'd call it voodoo, but they took it and really made it something. So um, a lot of that money was going back to Shashamani, and it was raising money for you know for 12 tribes and that kind of
Oh,
thing.
wow.
And then they, of course there was into the reggae and the dancehall entertainment industry. So when I was born, all of that was going on. So
Wow.
you know, my mother and my father would constantly go to Jamaica. When I was a kid, I would go with my mother and my father all the time. Like I was in Jamaica like every other month, basically. And you know, with them, there was always a bashment going on. There's always a sound clash going on. There's always some kind of outside event, a movie premiere. There's always something that was going on, and so it was a lot of ripping and running. But I also had, I definitely had quiet times in the summer in Connecticut with a lot of my 12 tribe family. So that was another experience that I had growing up. So it was my life was a little bit more unorthodox than most people, because we was right in the thick of, repatriation and dancehall and reggae and all of that. I wish I could say I had a regular experience, but it definitely was not.
Nah, it's actually great, man. It's great. It's the kind of experience that I would see all of us want for our children. You know what I'm saying? Exposure to the culture. I know myself and Baba Rock, his family was up in New York. I'm born in PA, but our roots in South Carolina. And both of our families, our parents, they kept us in South Carolina. They always was there. And that gave us the foundation. That gave us the identity that we needed to even identify as strongly as we do now with our family. Is that it was emphasized that, this don't stop you from being family. You got to check up on each other. Being a Rastafarian doesn't necessarily make you a Pan Africanist, does it?
I would say yes. I think a lot of people have been influenced by Rastafari. You know what I mean? It have been influenced by the music. Maybe they like certain parts of the culture, but at the root of it, you really can't separate Pan Africanism and Rastafarianism. It's one and the same.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I asked the question; it was a trick question, but the whole thing about it is that a lot of people are confused about that question, and to have you answer it, give some credence to it, being that you're a second generation, probably third, fourth, fifth generation Maroon, and definitely raised up in the Rastafarian culture and whatnot. So, besides your background, I seen you doing a lot of work with filming, and I see you working with Brother Clarence Congo right now. Can you highlight, what you got going on over there?
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, what I do, I'm a cinematographer. I've been working in media for about 13 years now, and I get a lot of that, of course, from my parents as well. But as far as with Clarence, me, Clarence, and Dominique, actually, who I know you just met, and we're working on a project called Roots Renaissance, man, and we really want to, like you said, just give that different perspective when it comes to hoodoo, when it comes to Gullah Geechee culture, when it comes to all of the Africanisms that's down here in the Deep South. We really want to kind of give a voice to those peoples, those elders. So that's something I'm really, really excited to be working on, to be completely honest with you. But yeah, I do a lot of work with my company that I co-own called Love. I have some more interviews and some more episodes that I Create Art mini doc that I'm working on, and I'm also working on a donation drive. There's this NGO called Society of Unity. And it's a young lady. I don't want to mispronounce her name. I think her name is Asada, but she's Liberian, and so she's teaching Liberian kids computer skills and how to film and take photography, that kind of thing. So we're doing a drive to get people to donate some old hardware, old computers, old cameras, to help the youth in Liberia. So that's something I'm excited about, and she'll be expanding to Sierra Leone as well. Like I hope to maybe even connect you guys one day. So. That's something I'm looking forward to.
Absolutely. It's powerful, bro. It's powerful. You're talking about Sierra Leone and Liberia. What I learned from being here is that you're talking about the same place. You're talking about the same exact people. That these borders, they're a mockery. They're a mockery to us, especially the native people, the people who never went out and come back. It's like, what do you mean there's a border there? You know what I'm saying? So, both countries have a similar heritage of African descendants repatriating and forming their own societies, and also impacting these modern countries and making a lot of historical contributions. With those Africans came a lot of brothers and sisters, ancestors from the Caribbean, different islands. You got the Jamaican Maroons that came to Freetown. You got people like Edward Blyden who came from the Virgin Islands. And you just have so many different African elements coming together in the 18th in the 1800s in this region. I was just watching a video, in fact, from Dr. Burroughs. He's one of the top historians for Liberia. He was just laying it out how significant Liberia, what you call Liberia today, was to the Mali Empire, and in terms of trading the pepper, the cola, and the salt production was so valuable. It's also these three things that made the Portuguese really settle down in that area. So it's a very powerful legacy. To see that so much of what we established in the West has come back and is now taking form on the continent is powerful. So we're definitely open to that. You know, we do a lot of work with the people here in communities in Sierra Leone. It'll be great. I know you're aware of the Maroons that came back to Freetown.
Absolutely.
Are you aware of the story?
I'm aware of, I would say, our side of it, right? As far as some of the developments that may have happened over there, I'm not going to claim to be an expert, only because I always leave room open for the people on the ground to tell their story. So I'm definitely aware of it from our side and what happened on our side for sure. But I would love to hear more about what happened once they reached over there.
Yeah, over here, people are very proud. The Creole community that descend from the Maroons, they'll tell you. They'll say, I'm a Creole. My people was Maroons. They'll tell you. My great-great-grandfather was a Maroon. You know, my great-great-grandfather was a Nova Scotian. You know, mine came from here. Those who really know are proud of the diaspora heritage that they have as well. They don't necessarily disconnect their identity from it. In central Freetown, you have a whole area called Maroon Town. And it was the settlement where the Maroons who came back originally settled down. They have a church there, one of the oldest churches in the country. St. John's Maroon Baptist Church. They have cemeteries, and they still meet and have a whole society among themselves. It'd be interesting to reconnect the dots there. But they were used. They were used like we all were used. You know, we were used to settle this area and create space for the British. And when we got out of line, they brought some Maroons over and put us back in line. And it was just colonialism. A lot of people start colonialism at the Berlin Conference, but it's an error. You have to start back with the establishment of the Freetown colony, and then work up a whole 100 years prior. You know, so it shows you that the Maroons were there, that the Black American Maroons, those who fled plantations and joined the British side, we was here. That the resistance came back to the continent. The ideal of freedom, self-help, justice, sovereignty, it was inside of the minds and the hearts of those who returned. And that's why how you get a Freetown or a Liberia, you know, land of the free. This is why, this was their concept. I want you to elaborate a little bit more about that in terms of, is there a connection, a consciousness of that happening within the general Jamaican community and particularly within the Rastafarian Maroon Society?
Absolutely. I think, you know, one of the things about Jamaica, man, that I really hope to exemplify and show, especially in my art and the content I want to produce, is to show what the makeup of the general population of Jamaica actually is. And when you kind of speak to the people on the ground, when you go to these different communities, you'll see that that consciousness has always been there. So even before Rastafarianism, there was Ethiopianism, and that was something that had was born out of South Africa and took root in the diaspora. And for them, what they were doing was separating from the white churches and connecting with the Ethiopian church, right? That's what they kind of saw as their religious home or spiritual home, if you will. Well, even before Ethiopianism, which started in the late 1800s, you also had revivalism. So you had Mayal and Pocomania and those kind of things. And the necessity of those religions or spiritual beliefs were people wanted to profess their African heritage, their African spiritual heritage, and they synchronized a lot of that with some of the Christian faith that was being pushed on them, so that way they can continue practicing they've always practiced. So the consciousness of Africa is something that has always been deeply rooted in Jamaica, especially when you start talking about the Maroon Society or the villages that haven't been incorporated, so to speak, into Jamaican colonial society at the time. People were holding on to their African roots. These people were fresh off the boat. You know what I mean? It wasn't like it was generations of people that had become creolized. Even though that existed as well, it was very, very, very African. There's never really been a time in Jamaica where Africa wasn't at the center. There's never been a period where they forgot and then had to try to pick it back up. It's always been there constantly, you know, because even after slavery was abolished in the British colonies, they started bringing over indentured servants from the Congo and from Yoruba land. So you have a people in Jamaica right now, known as Kumina, who still speak Kikongo or still have fragments of Kikongo in their language, in the Kumina language. So those kind of roots are deep in Jamaica. Even before we start getting into the political part of it, African heritage is very big in Jamaica, and that's something I want people to maybe learn a little bit more about.
I noticed that when I went to Jamaica, as soon as no sooner than we got off the plane, my driver, he knew about his Akan heritage. He knew about his Ashanti heritage, and he spoke on it. He spoke on Taki's War. He spoke on Cujo. He spoke on Queen Annie. And man, it was just wonderful to hear him just like that. We was just riding up the road, and he just gave us a full history, not a full history, but he gave us enough to let me know that Africa has always been a part of them.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And there's always been a strong exchange between Jamaica and Black America in particular, or African Americans, quote unquote. I'm just sitting here while you're saying this, thinking about the role that Bookman, who was from Jamaica, took into Haiti, played in sparking that liberation struggle. The greatest example of slave revolt, successful slave revolt that we could ever talk about. And it was because of a group of Maroons or rebellious people that was enslaved or free in Jamaica that was gripped up and taken over there. And they were able to ignite the struggle. They were able to unite with the people on a whole other island to the point that they was able to spark that revolution. I'm thinking also about what happened after the American Revolution. After the American Revolution, the majority of the white loyalists from South Carolina and Georgia, they gathered up all of their properties, their Africans, and they took them down to the Caribbeans, and the largest group ended up in Jamaica. They ended up around Kingston. And it's interesting because when I was reading the story, it said that the British colonists in Jamaica had a beef with the British colonists from America and their enslaved peoples because they had brought them down there and they was interfering almost. Then there was a reparations where Britain was reparating the loyalists from America, and they was coming up with resources that even the native white colonizers couldn't get access to. So it caused some stigmas. But there's a brother named George Lely, I believe. He's one of the first ministers of Silver Bluff Baptist Church. He was one of them. I believe he was the first Black minister in Jamaica that was actually being a missionary. But he was also someone who was enslaved in Georgia and taken away by his white loyalist leader. Later on, you find Dr. Love. Dr. Love, who influenced Marcus Mosiah Garvey. His friend and influencer was Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, South Carolina. And so you always have this AME connection and you have this Masonic connection.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up.
It seemed to have been our people's underground movement societies where they was able to communicate and pass information and identify with the same symbols and try to create some form of early cultural nationalism and standards. Can you elaborate on that? Like, do people in Jamaica understand that there was Black Americans brought to Jamaica on a number of occasions during this?
My question, and I love this conversation. My question to people is always, when did the Africans become Black American?
Exactly.
And I asked that question because you know, there was no such thing as a Jamaican national identity back then, right? We were under the colonial masters, if you will, and if we wasn't, we was free in our own Maroon society. So what? Even then, what would be a Jamaican, right? People were first generation on that island. Even Bookman wasn't born in Jamaica; he was born in Senegal or Senegambia
Exactly.
region. Then he was taken to Jamaica, and then he was taken to Haiti. So even when we bestow upon him that Jamaican heritage, which I appreciate, it's like, you know, is he really? You feel me? So it's the same thing. I look at Black Americans at the time. I don't even look at them as Black Americans. I look at them as family. And I think back then the lines were a little too blurred, and I don't even think they cared or even looked at it that way. I think, you know, especially when you start talking about the Prince Hall Masons, I have family members that are Prince Hall Masons, right? That are deeply embedded into that tradition, and that goes back from the late 1700s up until now,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
that connection has always been there. When you talk about the British using the what they call the West India Regiment and taking free and enslaved Africans from Jamaica and taking them all over the world to fight their wars. One example is when they had the West India Regiment and some Hausa soldiers fighting against the Ashanti Empire, right? So um,
Mm-hmm.
it was a very complicated time, but Jamaica has always been an international destination. Kingston has always been an international city. It was a port city, and there were merchants and people traveling from South Carolina, from New York, people that was free and enslaved, going back and forth to these different ports. So Jamaica has
Oh
always
yeah.
been connected to that network. Always, there's never been a disconnection. You know, I got cousins that are American,
I'm
so
glad.
yeah,
I'm glad you make that point. I'm so glad you make that point because even then they were making it clear that they was evolving an identity that was connected to the continent of our collective origins. When you look at the Masons, for instance, they had the African lives, and Mandinka was their code language in Boston.
right,
You understand?
Here, Good Hope.
You talk about the African Methodist Episcopal Church coming from
right.
Masonic people. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
why I said it looks like we was trying to form and keep this identity nationalized. And even when you talk about, Jamaica, what is Jamaica? It's almost similar to what Marcus Mosiah Garvey said when he said, "Why would I trade the island for a continent?" It
Right,
doesn't make sense. I'm identifying with my roots. And
right,
it's good, man, because we're having this conversation in 2023. We're using terminology that didn't exist back then. Identities that
right.
we made up or were made up for us since then. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing that we're proud about in terms of the Gullah Geechee identity as well. The name itself, what distinguishes us from everybody else is our Africanisms.
Right.
It's all about keeping it real with Africa at the end of the day. It really is. And the better we can do that, I think the more sane we are. The mental health is directly connected to this misinformation that's being put out there about us. So I appreciate, how you broke that down. Have you ever come to Africa? Do you plan to come to Africa?
Um, I haven't, but I definitely plan to. I think, for us as Rasta, Shashamani is kind of like a requirement to visit, so to speak, or maybe I just feel like that. Either way, that's probably one of the first destinations I want to touch. There's a lot of Rasta communities in Africa, in South Africa, in Ghana, and Gambia. Those are places that I
Oh
definitely
yeah.
want to visit as well, but just for the Rasta connection. I mean, I really want to visit Sierra Leone, Liberia, because if I'm being completely honest, that's an extension to me of Jamaican heritage and Jamaican lineage. So
Exactly.
I really want to go to those places and connect with my people over there for sure.
No doubt. No doubt.
There's definitely a similarity because when I was down there, also, man, it felt like I was in South Carolina, even the countryside and everything looked just like the countryside here, man. It's definitely a connection.
Mm,
Absolutely.
yeah, for
So where
sure.
you at now? Where you at now? You in Atlanta?
Yeah, so I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, specifically Ackworth, Georgia is where I live, but I work out of Atlanta, Georgia. So I've been here since 1996. We moved from Brooklyn around
Okay.
that time. I was
Okay.
back and
Yeah,
forth a little bit, but most of my life has been in Atlanta.
yeah, man. So I know we're looking at doing some more genetic genealogy studies there in the Orangeburg area, me and Baba. But another thing that we really want to be able to do is organize educational tours. You know, make sure people can get down to the low country, get down to the Sea Islands, get down even to the back country and to the other parts that are pertinent, you know, to the culture, just to engage it, because we know already that our ancestors were brought to Charleston, to Savannah, either directly from Africa or directly from the Caribbean. That we didn't just pop up out of nowhere, you know, and we know the interconnection. In fact, South Carolina will be considered like the mainland colony of Barbados. You know, it was Barbadians who went up there, Bajans who went up there and established South Carolina, and they took the slave economy, the slavery-based economy that they developed in Barbados, and they brought it and established Carolina with that. And they was really the first ones to establish a full slave economy society that was still connected to the British. And so there's so many ways that transfer, the folk ways, the food ways, you know, the birth rights, the burial rights, the rites of passages, our faith, the way that we praise, some of our what I would call our folk beliefs are very, very common with people in the Caribbean. So we find that the African connection, it didn't miss the United States of America or North America. It didn't miss the Africans there. It's just that certain places it was more concentrated. And so because we were so concentrated, particularly in South Carolina and Georgia, where we made up a black majority, an African majority since 1708. From 1708 on up, South Carolina was a black majority place during colonial era and as a state, all the way up until early 1900s when half of the population ended up going up to the north. They say the Great Migration just extended our community northward and westward. We never stopped being family because, like y'all, we went back for funerals, we went back for summers, we know our family, where we came from. But the reason why I'm saying all of this is because from South Carolina and Georgia, you have a concentration of African people that was a black majority throughout the majority of the term of enslavement, throughout the history of that state, those states. And then you also have these solid connections, whereas even, I believe it was, what's his brother's name, from the Haitian Revolution, not Denmark. I want to say Denmark Vesey, but he's from Charleston. Dessalines. Dessalines. Dessalines, as a small boy, he was a drummer, and he was in Savannah during the American Revolution. These are things that people don't understand. And so I believe they even have a statue in Savannah with like a boy playing the drums that's supposed to be him, like supposed to be his actual representation. And so these connections we usually don't talk about. You had the War of 1812 as well, where a whole lot of Africans were taken from North America and taken down to the Caribbean, and even some going up to Canada as well. So just all of this flow of information is very difficult for people to understand that we are truly one people. Truly one people. And so for us, the Spanish held Florida. Originally, the Spanish held South Carolina and Georgia. But when the British came, they pushed them down into Florida. Now, Florida, the Spanish, in order to fight against the British, of course, opened up freedom to any Africans who were enslaved by British that made it to the Spanish side. And that's how you get Fort Negro. That's how you get the later on Gullah Wars or the Seminole Wars, what you want to call it, you know. And so it's powerful because we have these Maroon heritages as well, but we don't necessarily recognize them like the brothers and sisters in the Caribbean do, or even South and Central America. We had a brother here we had a brother on the show recently from the Garifuna Maroon community. And he was talking about the movements and how they're everywhere, you know. And usually when you hear Jamaican or Maroon, you think Jamaica. Right. Usually, because the heritage is so impactful there. But to look around and realize that, wow, Maroonage was normal. Maroonage was an aspect of enslavement that has been swept under the rug, and that there were certain Africanized cultures that retain majority African identity, majority African tradition inside of that. And I really believe that that's the roots of the majority of our cultures right now. What would you say to those out there who have been studying the Maroon history, as well as, can you highlight some of the prominent Maroon societies that you're aware of? I know there's some in South America, Central America. Can you give us some examples?
Absolutely. So the first thing I would say is I think one of the things we need to do is kind of reorient ourselves on how we look at this history, especially colonial history. I think a lot of times we don't give ourselves the proper agency of who we are and what we did on this side of the hemisphere, so to speak. So with that being said, even when we say stuff like the Spanish held Florida, that's kind of it's not really how it went. You know what I mean? Like the Spanish definitely were in Florida. The Spanish definitely made allegiances and signed treaties with the people that occupy Florida, right? When you have the Seminoles, and then of course you have the Gullah Geechee and the different people from South Carolina who came down and settled with the Seminoles and were called the Black Seminoles. That's really, when you start talking about Florida, that's the majority of what Florida was. Now you had St. Augustine and different places on the coast where of course you had the colonialists, if you will. But I think they overemphasize a little bit on how much of that was controlled by the European powers, because we have this thought in our mind that the European powers was Thanos, that they were overlords and supremely powerful and allowed certain things to happen. But really, it was the other way around. The reason they had to sign that treaty with the Maroons in Jamaica was so that they could be allowed to survive and live and thrive on that island. A lot of people don't know the British also allied themselves with, for instance, the Mosquito Kingdom, which is another, if you want to call it a Maroon society, that was it was indigenous Central Americans and Africans that had mixed. They mixed quite a bit actually, but the Mosquito Kingdom made their own political decisions, so to speak, and allied with the British because their enemy was the Spanish, and so they brought them over in the first Maroon War to Jamaica to fight the Maroons. And so you have these kind of interactions with these different indigenous and, of course, African societies in the Caribbean. And so I use them as an example to kind of highlight the deep political formations that existed in the New World, so to speak, that really are the people that held sway and had power. So I would say that the Maroons were everywhere. Anywhere that there were free Black people, there were Maroons, if you will, because the Maroons is really kind of it's a people, yes, it's a legacy, it's a heritage, but it's also a political awareness of sovereignty and fighting against, these colonialists that want to come over and take over. So the Africans came over with an identity. They came from Oyo, they came from the Ashanti Empire, they came from Mali, they came from all these different places, and they continued that political formation in the Western world. The difference is they may not have been recognized by the Europeans as a whole. They might have not been recognized worldwide by some of these people, but just because you don't recognize the state doesn't mean these people are stateless, right? Mm-hmm. So you have the Maroons in Suriname, you have Maroons in Central America, you have Maroons in Jamaica and Trinidad and St. Vincent, Antigua, Florida, Alabama, the swamps of in the north. I can go on and on and on. But anywhere that there were free Black people, they were Maroons. They had their own sovereign societies in Colombia and Brazil. I can continue, but free African people were absolutely sovereign and self-determining in the Western world.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. And that's key. That's so key for us to lay out, so our people can really have that paradigm shift. We can start seeing it from our own perspective, how we experienced it, how we see it. What role did we play? We wasn't just being dominated and dictated to. One of the things I learned here in Sierra Leone is about the struggles that the indigenous people had among themselves during that period, and that there were some groups that would resist the transatlantic slave trade and the different activities that was related to it on the ground, and would live in Maroon kind of societies. Like they were forming themselves in secrecy and in bushes to make sure that they was away from the danger of being enslaved. Other people were going up to the highest mountaintop so they could have the advantage in case of someone trying to capture their people. And so there was just so much going on. And I'm just talking about Sierra Leone, but I could imagine it being, general. And so, the pattern of us breaking free and establishing community and also resisting the oppression is African. It's African. It's from the continent. We, like you said, we carried it over. We always talk about, the wars and our ancestors not being slaves, but being war captives. That means that there was people who were knowledgeable about resistance. That means that there was people who had experience in fighting in different terrains, from the Congo, from Angola, from these so-called modern neo-colony territories, all the way up. And so that immense amount of community knowledge and warfare is really what I see when I think of Maroonage. It's just like now, you got some people that will fight the system and separate from it, and you got others who feel maybe like they can't, there ain't no other option. And that's why it's so important to talk about this Maroonage, because it's always been, for a lot of us, not even an option.
Right.
We want to be free. And we're going to risk it all to be free. And our babies are going to appreciate it. So it's like those different cultures, when you hear about W.E.B. Du Bois talking about the double consciousness of the American Negro, those who had the tendency to be go into the Eurocentric system, and there were those who were still trying to hold on to what they consider black culture, but it really was that retained that our people built these little Africas with, these Black Wall Streets with. They was implementing, they was using traditional wisdom and knowledge passed down. It's very important because they say like, oh, we wasn't educated, they didn't let us read books. They didn't teach us. But there was a tremendous amount of education that was passed and retained.
Absolutely.
It has nothing to do with European knowledge, science, or ways.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate your narrative, like I was telling you before the show, because it allows for us to challenge the perspective forced on us. It allows me to have a different conversation with even those who taught me lies, and a very informative conversation. It's happening here in Africa as well. People are returning back to the source and trying to re-narrate this story. So it's not a defeatist type of mentality that it produces. That our story produces victory. Our story is a victory over oppression. Our story is despite their attempts. You understand? Right. So we can stand in our true stature today. So I really appreciate the narrative that you be spitting, bro. It's so powerful. Anybody out there, y'all make sure y'all get in contact with this brother, man. Abib Rodney on Facebook. Every day, bro, I follow your posts, and that's truly why. In the modern day, we have to be Maroons. Today, if you're a Pan Africanist or you belong to a traditional African group or society, we have to think politically, economically, socially, culturally, spiritually, like our Maroon ancestors. Or we will always be pimped into being patriotic American citizens, patriotic Jamaican citizens, patriotic this, everything but Africans. And I think we're living in a time where Africa and Africans are experiencing an awakening, a real serious awakening. And so I want to ask you, where do you see this going at in the next 5 to 10 years? And what's really needed to get this information down to the grassroots, down to the babies, down to the single mothers, down to the brothers on lockdown, down to the regular working class people that might not have no crisis going on, but they need the information too. How can we get it all the way even up to our most influential African descendant elites, whether they be in music, in film, sports, whatever they may be, and they need the message too, because their platforms are so big that for us to neglect them that information, when we have a way to get them that information, will only lead to more mass confusion. So, can you give me your vision for how we, as modern day Maroons, can approach this Pan African struggle?
Well, for me, I believe in something that I like to call like practical Pan Africanism, right? And I think the approach that we have to take is we have to empower ourselves and really educate ourselves about our agency. One of the things that I talk about a lot, even in my circles as a filmmaker, is that we don't really need the oppressor, if you will. We don't need these other folks, if you will. If we choose to engage with them, that's a choice, but we don't need them, right? There's almost 1.5 billion people on the continent of Africa. There's 400 million people in the diaspora, right? And so when you start talking about filmmaking, for instance, Nollywood is sometimes number 3, but most of the time number 2 biggest movie markets in the entire world, right? And so as a black filmmaker, if you're making films, you're in Atlanta and you just want to make a film, why not target the Nigerian community? Why not, target the African community and start connecting with some of those folks? Because they're here, right? Those folks are here making films and moving in the industry as well. And so I think honestly, it's going to take some media to kind of push out that culture, and I think a lot of that is already happening. And what that does is awaken the spirit, even if these people aren't necessarily Pan-African oriented yet, they're moving in that direction. Once they understand the power that we have in numbers, the power that we have as far as our resources, the power that we have as far as our traditions and cultures, the power that we have from our past, talking about telling African Americans that, hey, there's a whole country called Liberia that was in Sierra Leone that was started by your ancestors, right? That y'all have a diaspora in the Caribbean as well. You know what I mean? That you have a diaspora there's African Americans that settled in Lagos in the 1800s. These kind of conversations, these kind of things, I don't think people understand. So something I've been reading recently is a brother named James Vaughn. This is an African American that moved to Liberia, ended up in Abeokuta, right? Ended up in Lagos, fought as a sharpshooter in the Oyo Civil War. You know what I mean? Fought against white missionaries in Lagos because of their racist policies. And his descendants have been politically active and Pan-Africanists ever since, right? So these are connections that we don't even know about, like you were saying, as far as Sierra Leone is concerned. And I think more exposure to what we did in the past, how powerful we were, right? Haiti was a victory. The fact that we ended and abolished the slave trade was a victory. This is what our ancestors did, right? So I think getting some of those stories out there, getting people to understand a little bit more deeply how political connected we are. And I think it's going to take Africa to really stand on its feet and really start defending and standing up for its people outside of the continent. I think a lot of that is happening now, right? Again, that you're having that conversation with CARICOM and the African Union. And I know a lot of people don't trust those government bodies and don't really want to deal with those. But a lot of these conversations are being had in these circles. There are people that don't agree with the African Union and some of their actions now, but are still engaging with them and criticizing to their face and letting them know you're not doing right by our people. And so I think dialogue is important as well. You know what I mean? You can't hold people accountable if they don't hear you. So but I have hope. Unlike most people, I think all of this stuff is happening. And really, I just think it's awareness. I don't think people know how Pan-Africanist the governments in the Caribbean are, right? And a lot of these families in Jamaica that was Maroon families, that were Rastafarian families, that were fighting against the colonialists, they're now a part of the Jamaican government. There are Pan-Africanists that's in Parliament right now fighting on our behalf. There's Mia Motley in Barbados, you know what I'm saying? And some of the things she's been doing and putting together. So, I think awareness is what it is. I think if more African Americans tapped into the Caribbean, tapped into West Africa, tapped into East Africa, I think that, we would realize that this fight has been going on, is ongoing, and we're going to succeed. And I think that's really the message that I want to give people, that we're going to win.
Well, I believe the connections are being made whether they wanted to or not. Because as far as me and Chief, we're making our connections right now with family members, and so the connections are definitely being made, and it can't be stopped. It's going to happen. It's going to happen whether we wanted to or not.
Oh yeah, and then on top of that, it's just like the ideals that people have of Pan-Africanism right now and just the overall challenge to Pan-Africanism and what we see coming up in parts of our community, part of our, you know, the activists, people who are out there trying to give information, seeking to divide us by appealing to these terms, just like what you're saying. Like, what is African American? You know, what is that? You know, but using these terms and now remixing these terms into whole different terms to hold on to these really backwards ideals about who we are. It doesn't lead us anywhere but begging others for reparations. It doesn't have a self-help, a global empowerment agenda with it. When you talk about our people utilizing those entities, you have to remember that even people like the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey sent representatives to the predecessor of the UN to represent the cause of Africans. That there has to be a legitimate political discourse and interaction between us and even our enemies.
Right.
You know, the discussions have to be had. There's forums for that. There's platforms for that. And I personally would like to see a lot more Pan-Africanists occupying those spaces because they're there. You know, a lot of people don't know that when Marcus Garvey was deported back to Jamaica, he got actively involved in politics. He started a political party. You know, he got involved because without that power, that local power to determine policies and how resources will be distributed within the community, without having that power, then we are virtually colonized. We are virtually colonized if the people themselves don't have it. And I believe that there's a role for Pan-Africanists. There's a role for Maroons. There's a role for all of these different mentalities and ideologies to coexist within a liberated Africa. You understand, right? Absolutely. So all these different divisions that they create, religious divisions, ethnic divisions, this ideal that we are all Africans and we all have the right to share and tell each other's stories is powerful, especially speaking to what you're saying about Nollywood as opposed to Hollywood. Hollywood seems to be deliberately destroying the minds of our people and committing mass menticide completely all the time. And Nollywood, I believe, from my own experience, could be a lot more educational, could be a lot less comedic, you know? And I think that the infusion of Pan-Africanist filmmakers like yourself, brothers like Clarence Congo, he came over here, of course, you know, he was over here just mixing, you know, and people understanding that and being able to say, okay, blacksmiths, they didn't just bring us here they didn't just take us from Africa so that we can plant food. They also brought us there so we can be their blacksmiths. They brought us there so we can build their homes and build their cities. And we had more skills than just farming. And so I was just watching, I think I was telling you before the show, I was watching an interview or a little video on YouTube by a Gullah elder. Her name is Pat Gunn, Pattgunn, I believe. And she's from Savannah, native of Savannah. And she does a tour. She walks around Savannah and shows the actual African symbology, the symbols that the early blacksmiths who were brought over left encoded. They left Adinkra symbols. Like there's over 100 Adinkra symbols that's all marking over the city of Savannah. Most of downtown Savannah, and most of downtown Savannah is a big mass grave. Every other year they find more graves. So our ancestors were brought there not just to be on farms, getting whipped and changing our names and the way the Roots movie says it. It also was highly skilled in multiple trade areas. Also, our people were traders. Our people were long distance and short distance traders in Africa. We understood money and exchange and things like that now. So they use us in a lot of ways. I found an ancestor that they used to actually breed their horses, but he had so much knowledge of horses that they used him to gamble. This was during slavery. And so it's just the pimping of our intellectual resources and our physical labor This is what we're fighting for. We want to reclaim that for ourselves, our families in Africa, and the world ultimately. You know, I don't see Pan Africanism as an anti-movement. I see it more like Africa getting back to the level where we are supposed to be in terms of influence, in terms of everything else in the world. And you know, there's people out there that we're gonna have to extend a olive branch to and try to work together. But at the same time, it has to be us. It has to be us. I would love to see the underground Pan-African cultural movement, from the artists to the filmmakers to the actors to the models to the fashion designers, that's particularly in the United States and places like Atlanta and New York and California, that have these bases to truly begin to build that bridge across the Atlantic. And not only for Nollywood, but all of these countries have suffering industries. As you see, the brother Michael Blackson went back and started a comedy club and all that in Ghana because it's needed. It's really needed. And these are business ventures. These are opportunities for you to establish yourself strongly. So yeah, man.
Absolutely. I think when we start talking about white supremacy, something that we oftentimes don't highlight is the fact that they have united across class lines, right? You have people that are poor in Kentucky that still is going to support the elite in their communities because they see themselves as one. And I think the mistake that we've done is because we've been separated from our power base, if you will, we tend to think of ourselves as downtrodden and poor folk, and this is who Black people are. And I think there's a disconnect between those of us who have the ability and the power to speak on our behalf, and then those of us that are truly oppressed under these systems that are holding us down. And those people are one and the same. They're not different, right? These are family ties, right? We have people in Jamaica who live in the poorest neighborhood in Kingston who have family ties to people that are part of the elite, because those ties are familial, right? They're tied to maybe a community in St. Mary or something, but these people are family, and they're always going to be family, right? And so it's across class lines a lot of times that you see in my mind, true Pan-Africanism, because it's going to take those of us that have the most to speak on behalf of the ones that don't. And so I say all of that to kind of bring a full circle, because I think a lot of times when we think of Rastafari and Rastafarianism, we think of it as a religion. And any Rastafarian will tell you it's not a religion, it's a way of life. And, one of the things that people don't understand is that Rastafari, which is his name, right, Haile Selassie, he was somebody that, he was a founder of the League of Nations, right? He was a founder in the UN. He had a seat at, the proverbial table, but he had his own table. And, he was literally fighting on behalf of us. He trained Nelson Mandela. A lot of people don't realize that in the 60s. He was supporting a lot of these liberation movements. He helped create and start the Organization of African Unity, right? And so you have these internationally minded people in Jamaica who saw him as a beacon of strength for our people and pled loyalty to him and his movement, right? And, we don't talk about the Ethiopian World Federation, which was started by Haile Selassie. He sent an emissary to Harlem, of all places. They started a chapter of the Ethiopian World Federation to garner support for the Ethiopian war front against the Italians in the 30s. And there were African Americans, there were Jamaicans, there were all different kinds of people that joined the Ethiopian World Federation. And many of the early Rastas were members of the Ethiopian World Federation. So this was always a political, this was always an anti-imperialist. There's always been a Pan-Africanist movement. And so it's because of our engagement with Haile Selassie that he gave us, and when I say us, I mean the diaspora, land in Ethiopia. This was in 1948. There's a place called Shashamani. It's been in existence ever since then. And it wasn't just for Rastas, it was for all of the diaspora, right? Everybody. So these are things that when people talk about Rastafari, they don't realize. They think it's just some crazy people in Jamaica, that's worshiping an emperor, and they don't realize the political connections that was there from the beginning. So that's something I just really want to kind of get the message out, is that we've always been politically active, and we're going to continue to be politically active. But in order to be politically active, you got to be active. You know what I'm saying? This is something that's it's not a ideology or theology or something that we kicking for people to believe in over another thing. This is an active thing. If you're a black man and you travel to any country in the world, you have to thank Pan Africanism for that, because black people wasn't welcomed everywhere they went. Right, black people
right.
were not given the same kind of rights everywhere that they went. They weren't respected everywhere that they went. So if you're a black man and you're traveling the world, if you're a black man in America, if you're a black man in the Caribbean, no matter where you at, you definitely have to tip your hat to the Pan Africanists that have been doing this work for a long time. And I think all of us, once we get that consciousness, man, we can move past all these divisions and divides about heritage and identity. You can be whoever you want, claim whatever you want as far as being a black man and how you show up in the world. But as long as we're fighting collectively, I don't see no issue, man. I don't really care if you a black American or you're Jamaican or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. And I think that they want it to matter to us, so we can be confused and looking at other things instead of paying attention to what they're doing. So yeah.
No doubt, definitely. So our hour is up. The hour went too fast, man. It went way too fast. But I want to give you opportunity, man. Any last words out there? Where people can get connected with you and things like that. But first, I want to give Baba Kimo one last opportunity as well. If you have anything left over.
Well, and I'm just glad excuse me. I'm glad we had this opportunity to talk to you, man. And I'm down with all the Pan African business and all that, man. You know how we do it here in South Carolina. But we want to reach out to you, brother. Anything we can do, let us know.
Yeah, for sure. And if you ever happen to be moving through the area, make sure you hit Baba Kimo up, man. Baba Kimo is a wealth of information.
Yeah, you're only what, about 3 or 4 hours away from Orangeburg. So it's been a while since I've been in Atlanta, but I was just in Augusta, so it's not that far. It's nothing at all to get to Atlanta.
Absolutely. I've been talking to the brother Dominique, man, quite a bit about that. So we definitely plan on making a trip out there. And honestly, I'll be honored to even to interview you if I would have that honor, man, because speaking to the elders is something we want to emphasize a little bit. So for sure, I'll be out there soon.
Oh, for sure. Hey, Abib, when I tell you Baba Kimo is the plug for that area right there, you gotta realize that originally Orangeburg was a district. They called it an overarching district. So it represented a region of South Carolina, not just a county.
Right. Wow.
Now you got like 6 or 7 counties that broke off of that. But our ancestry existed since the district. So our bloodlines through all them counties, Edfield, Aiken, all them counties. But Baba Kimo has been doing great work to research, and he has a close connection with elders. Certain elders who maybe have never told their story. They may have never been interviewed in their whole life, but they know how to make syrup. They know how to make, they still do the same things the old ways, to capture that culture.
Yeah, we do it here. We some country boys here in Orangeburg. We do our thing. Right now, this is barbecue season right now. So everybody be barbecuing and fish frying. And I love to go to these different functions and speak on African culture, African history. That's what I do. I love, bringing it to the people.
Absolutely.
So, Abib, any last words, brother?
Yeah, man. To the people, if you want to follow me on Facebook, my name on there is Abib Rodney, Rodney. On Instagram, I'm icreateart.atl. Just connect with me. I would love for people to look out for what we're doing. Like I said, I co-own a company called Love, LXVE. I have a streaming platform called Tone.vision is the URL for the website. But follow me, follow what we're doing, and I look forward to connecting more with, especially the Gullah community.
No doubt.
That's what I got to say.
No doubt.
Thank you very much, brother, man. Hopefully we'll get you back out here soon, man. Get you back, on the show. If you have anything going on, let us know, man. We'll make sure we circulate it throughout our community. And, hopefully you make it over to Orangeburg soon, man.
Absolutely.
You're
Absolutely.
welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored, man. I'm honored to have been on this platform, and I thank you, brothers, once again.
No doubt, brother.
No doubt.
We're going to let you go now. We're going to close out. But, man, we appreciate you. It's been great.
Thank you, man. Yeah, this is dope. I had a great time.
I had a good, yeah, right.
Baba Kimo.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, man. Another one down for the year, man. Another one down for the year.
Another good episode, man. The brother's knowledgeable and knows what he's talking about. I enjoyed it.
Man, it's such a wealth of information. You know,
Yes,
we read the books and stuff like that, but when you sit down and talk with the people who actually live through the life, man, it's so different, man. And you know, you could just feel his African spirit. You could tell that his parents gave him Africa, no matter where he was born. They gave him what they had of Africa. They put it in him.
Well, that's the whole Jamaican thing, man. I felt it when I was in Jamaica, so it's real.
Yeah, man, it's powerful. So, what you about to do today? Juneteenth is going down?
I'm gonna go out to the parade later on this afternoon, and then well, I'm about to go grub right now. Go find something to eat, you know. But yeah, I'll go out to the parade this afternoon. Go see what's happening in the community.
Yeah, so you said the location changed now.
Oh yeah, well the parade is going to be running on Amelia Street. Usually it runs down Russell Street, but and we're out at the fairgrounds. They're out at the old fairgrounds. That's where they're having a gospel show this afternoon also.
Okay, no doubt, man. So hey, man, look, you enjoy your Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, Baba. And also, man, you know, go out there and enjoy Juneteenth, man. You know, it means different things to different people, man. But you know, it's always good when the community can get together.
Yes, sir. All right.
Yes. All right. Talk to you later, Baba. For y'all out there, we'll be back in 2 weeks with another show. We ain't gonna tell you who it is yet, but you're gonna love this guest. All right.
Exactly. All right.